Welcome, listeners, to Artist Tales, the podcast that features and celebrates artists from different walks of life. I'm your host, Heather Martin, and in this episode, I'm chatting with Etinosa Yvonne, who is a documentary photographer based in Nigeria. Welcome. It's really good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Etinosa Yvonne. I am a documentary photographer and a visual artist. I work and live here in Nigeria. I'm a graduate of theater arts. I haven't practiced yet, and I started photography in 2017. And before that, I used to be a social media marketer, and then okay, so in 2015, I was working as a social media marketer. In 2015, I resigned from my job. I wanted to start a travel blog, and so I decided that I would start to go to different parts of Nigeria and ask questions about different tourist sites, and sort of maybe to promote those sites. And so I got a small Nikon Coolpix camera because the idea was to have first-hand information about tourist sites as well as images that would go with, you know, to show people what the site looked like. Well, that didn't work out because I couldn't put my thoughts together at the time, and also I couldn't, fund the project. But what that did was to make me have an idea of what photography was. And then in 2016, but I stopped it and then I started working. In 2016, I was working for a health organization, and then I met a couple, and the woman had fistula. Fistula happens after prolonged labor. And what happens is that she pees uncontrollably. And I remember, I told my colleagues, the medical doctors, and I said, I met this woman there. She would like to have some sort of surgery or any help that she can get so that she stops peeing. And at the time that we met her, she had been, I'll use the word leaking, as they call it, for 5 years. And, the doctors agreed. So I volunteered. I took them to a place, a national health center in the southeastern part of the country. And within 2, 3 days, they had the surgery and she was fine. But I didn't just follow them. I had this camera. It was my sister's camera. So I took pictures of them from when we were in the bus, when we got to the hospital. And, at the time, I wasn't quite sure what I was doing, but I just knew that I needed to find a way of highlighting their issues. Now, another thing working in the health facility or working with the organization did for me was it sort of made me see another part of my country which I'd not seen before. Because when I started working for the health organization, I had to, I was tasked with setting up a telemedicine outfit in a rural community. And that was my first time as an adult going into a rural community. And I saw like the disparity, people in rural communities and urban spaces. And that made me say, there has to be a way of raising awareness about the issues or the realities of people in rural and hard to reach spaces. And that was really what made me feel like I need to, maybe I should think about photography. But it wasn't up until 2017. I resigned from my job and I started to read and learn about photography, watched a lot of videos on YouTube, read a lot of articles, just trying to understand what photography is and how I could leverage this medium to contribute my quota of change to my society. And in 2018, I went for my first photography workshop in Lagos, organized by a senior colleague. And also hearing him speak about photography was different. It was different from any article or any video I'd watched. It was so different. And it was there that I knew that, I'm really going to do photography. I'm going to figure it out. And I realized it was a very powerful tool, and I'm going to leverage the benefits of this medium to tell stories, to share, and just to see how I could, like I said before, contribute my quota of change to my society.
So I guess that to me it sounds like kind of recording the change and sort of what's happening in a very honest way is kind of driving the documentary photography that you're doing.
When I started, my interest was basically, like I said, going into a rural environment as an adult was a shocker for me, seeing how people that were just 45 minutes away from the federal capital territory where I reside, which is of Nigeria, and seeing the realities of people in that area. And I'm like, how is it that they live in this part of Nigeria? They are near the seat of power, but they lack access to social basic social amenities. And it just felt like, we're living in different realities in Nigeria. And that was one of the things that made me say, how can I raise awareness? So my interest in photography started off from how can I, raise awareness about. At the time, I used to just say that I was focusing on rural and underserved areas, but as I continue to grow in the practice, even if I wouldn't say my interests have changed a lot, but it's still the same thing. Whether I'm looking at social injustice, the aim is still raising awareness about issues, advocating where necessary with the topics, or just basically also documenting my society, preserving, my society, making sure that this moment that we exist in, I have it. I've frozen it somewhere and keeping this visual document that can be handed down or can be made available to generations that are coming. And also, it has become like a tool for expression. I think more recently I've been really questioning, why is it that I'm doing this photography? What are the things that you want to do apart? Because the way that I used to think when I started in 2018 is different from the way that I think now. So I continue to question what it is I want out of photography. What are the things, the way that I'm working, why it's I ask myself, why are you doing this? How are you going to you're using this tool, and then what else? And that has also helped me to become more interested in what I'm doing. For example, I noticed that before now, when I go into a space, I'm just more focused on, if I'm working on a project, I focus on just my project and that's it. But now, looking at how, I'm seeing the importance of documenting and archiving my society. So now I'm having this, I don't just have the approach of focusing on one issue, but I'm seeing myself as some sort of, shall I say, building an archive. So I'm not just contributing my quota or raising awareness about things happening in my society, but I'm also trying to build an archive of my society. So that sort of makes me know that when I go into a space, when I'm researching, I need to also look at the other aspects of that society or that space and document and keep it. Like I said, for the generations that are coming after now.
I have to admit, I don't know a whole lot about Nigeria, so I'd be interested to hear what the kind of social or challenges that you're documenting.
Yeah, Nigeria is I think it's Africa's most populous nation. It's a very interesting, diverse, beautiful, chaotic, wonderful, amazing country. We have the good, the bad, the ugly here, and I think that exists in every society. But for me, I would say that the things that I focus on, the first work that I started to do, so I'll share this story. When I started photography, one of the things I used to do was when I learned on YouTube. So because my interest started out, was based off my interactions and my observations with people in rural environments. So when I would learn and I had some money, I would go to these communities and then I'll have discussions with them and I'll say, what are the problems that you people have here? Do you have water? Do you have light? And I was trying to shape in my head, like think through how is it that I could use photography to highlight these issues, right? And then in the course of all of that, in 20, I think it was in 20, maybe 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 2017. I started to interact with a lot of people in a particular camp, a displaced persons camp in Abuja. And just asking them questions, how was your life? So there are people that have been displaced by the ongoing Boko Haram insurgency in the northeastern part of the country. And so asking them about their life, what was life like for them before, it was really mind blowing to hear some of the things that they would say. And that sort of made me think, it's not just coming here to say they don't have water, but these are real people who had everything going on for them. And now, things are not the way they used to be and they are struggling to adjust. And so when I started my first project, It's All in My Head in 2018, I knew that I'd had conversations with these people. But it's not just, I'm trying to see beyond just the physicality of their issues, but how does that impact their mental health? And I sort of said, okay, I'm going to use this project to explore the coping mechanisms of people who have survived terrorism and instances of conflict and cruelty. And that was the first project I started. Then I started to work on the project, and I have been working on the project since 2018. It's still a work in progress. And then as I continued, I needed to find a balance because I realized that the project became heavy for me, especially impacting my own mental health. And then just observing my society. I saw a need. I started to observe the patterns of men, the grooming culture of men, and I started another project based on that. Now, the way that my projects are, there are several issues, but I try not to just focus on the issues of the country, the social issues. Like I said, there's always the good, the bad, the ugly. So the way that I work on my projects is one might be highlighting social issues, like for example, social injustice. It might be looking at, I mean, for example, it's all in my head is sort of like an advocacy project where I'm saying to people that when we have people who go through or who have witnessed such atrocities, we as a society need to provide space for them to be able to speak about their trauma, whether it's using a communal approach or it's a person to person approach. That has sort of like an advocacy aspect to it. But when I started this other project, it is now me just asking questions. It's not like my unbox. If I look at my other project unbox, it's not a social issue. It's just an aspect of our society that is setting it's having a conversations that these hidden conversations, things that people don't really want to talk about, and then you bring it to the fore, and then you have people talking about it. So there are different things that I look at in the projects that I work on. And then also because I work on commission projects, so that also avails me opportunity to work on different types of subject matter. If you're working for, an editorial, instances where I work for editorials, they might be talking on, covering a topic that has to do with, or a story that has to do with like kidnapping in the north, and then you go and cover that type of story. So there, or maybe you're photographing something that is lighter, looking at Nollywood industry in Nigeria, and then you photograph that. So there's all these different things that I actually touch on with my work actually, not just social issues, but other things that make us a country. And it's not only our problems that make us a country. There are other, like I said, there are other things. There's the good, there's the bad, the ugly. And I try to make sure that in my practice I find a balance. So not just showing just one extreme, showing the bad, but showing the good, showing the ugly, showing the beauty, showing the chaos, showing all of these things, bringing them together.
So it sounds like you're trying to capture a balance of Nigerian society
Yeah,
and potentially that, even the nuance as well.
that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I try not to make it look, because when I started in my first project, it already started to look like, also the way that people were receiving me as an artist was just as if these are the only kind of subject matter that I cover. And to be honest, in all fairness to Nigeria, we might have all the issues that we have, but we still have people moving about with their life, moving on with their life. So it is sort of unfair to just focus on this one extreme and forget that there are actually people going on with their lives regardless of this extreme. So I give you an example. Last year, I was working in one of the northern states in Nigeria, in Kaduna. And before I went to Kaduna, there were several reports I'd read from newspaper articles about how there was serious kidnapping in Kaduna, there were killings in the southern part of Kaduna. And then eventually I got there because I needed to do my research. And I reached out to my friend who is also a documentary photographer, and I said, wow, when you read the news, it actually sounds as if everybody in Kaduna is dying. But look at me in the metropolis and everybody is living their life. So the way that the country is, I mean, we have issues, and the reality of every society to an extent is there might be issues there. There are still aspects of daily life where people still, strive to make things happen. We might, like you asked, we talked briefly about COVID, and I said, well, we have moved past COVID here because we have other things, other pressing issues. We have our economy that we're trying to, which has been devastated by COVID. We're battling with insecurity, the elections around the corner. So there are still people that are, seeing past all of this, maybe headline news, and, people are still living their lives. Even when there was COVID, people were still getting married and giving out their kids in marriage and all of that. So I try to find the balance in the kind of stories that I work on. So I'm not just working on one extreme. I think it's even too hard. It also affects your mental health when you just work on certain types of stories, especially the heavy subject matter. So personally, on my own, I try to find opportunities to work on different types of subject matter and also show how diverse we are as a people, because Nigeria is a very diverse country. And if I'm only focusing on the bad, people do not see that. They only see this one side of this country.
To me, I think what you're doing is very important because, as you said, as your friend has said, often in the news, it's the bad.
Mhm,
It's that kind of one side of things. And I agree with you. Every country has the good, bad, and in between, and the grayness. And, it's understanding that. So, it sounds like you really, I quite like your approach, and it sounds like a good approach to have. The question I have is, so what do you do with the material that you have? So do you get it published in magazines? Do you exhibit? I mean, what do you do with it to get it seen?
So the projects that I work on and the projects I continue to work on, fortunately for me, have been published, have been exhibited. And when I started my project, the first project I started, I remember I showed it to some senior colleagues and they said, you should apply for a grant to continue this work. And I applied for my first grant, and that sort of got me my first feature in NPR. I got my first grant from Women Photograph, which is a US based organization. And then I got my first publication at NPR, which is an American publication. And after that, it just happens every year. So the work that I do, I'm not just doing it. Like I said, there are projects that I'm genuinely interested in. So when I do this work, I find ways to push them out because the reason I'm doing this research is let people know what's going on, whether it's me talking about mental health or it's me questioning men and saying, why do you dress like this? The most important thing is I want people to be involved in the projects. I don't do the projects, except it's something extremely personal, but the projects I do are projects where I want people to see them, to have conversations around them, to talk about them, to contribute to them. So where necessary, I apply for opportunities to push the work out there. Unfortunately, the works have been published, the works have been exhibited, part of my projects have been part of photo festivals. Last year, thankfully, I had two solo exhibitions. My first solo exhibitions, it happened in the space of the first one was in November, the second was just a week or two after the first solo exhibition. So yes, I try to make sure that they don't just stay on my hard drive. They're out there being seen, and people can learn more about topics that I'm covering and all of that.
And what has been the reaction or feedback that you've gotten from people seeing your work?
So it's been very interesting. I'll give you an example using my first solo exhibition in Nigeria. So because Nigeria is a very big country, the research I did, the chapter of the research I did is from my project. It's all in my head. I was looking at instances of cruelty. So I worked with children and vulnerable people who had been labeled as witches and how that impacts their mental health. The way that I presented the project was sort of different from the way that people are used to seeing my project. It was immersive, and I presented this solo exhibition took place in Lagos. It was impressive to see the kind of feedback where, first off, people they had no idea that this type of things happen. So having the feedback where people come and meet you and say, I had no idea this is happening in our country. Some people are saying, what can we do? Some came to share stories of, I've been in this type of situation. I didn't know things like this are still happening. It's important that we continue to do this. I would say so far for all of the different projects that I worked on, it's impressive the different types of feedback that you get from different people in different parts of the world. Beginning of this year, The Guardian did sort of like I had an interview with a writer from The Guardian, and I submitted they asked for an image, and I shared this image of the Fulani woman I photographed in the northern part of Nigeria, and specifically Yobe State, and we talked about what inspired that image and my interactions with the person photographed and all of that. And when the article was published, I got so many messages from different people in different parts of the world, all saying, some people would talk about how they had come to Nigeria years ago. They were happy to see, somebody connect to read about Nigeria again. Some people would talk to you about their experiences in different African countries. Some of them were just, happy to hear about me speaking about the process of taking that image, or also talking about it from a photographer standpoint, how you try to collaborate, you don't just go to a place and take an image and all of that. So the feedback is always very interesting. Actually, it's different feedback for different projects that I'm working on, and it's very most times it's always very helpful feedback that sort of also continues to propel me to do what I do, and sometimes I take this feedback and then I sit with it and think of, okay, how can I apply some of this feedback that I've gotten from people?
Now, we have a mutual friend, Nina Franco, who I interviewed in the first series. She mentioned that you did a residency in London, England, or in England.
Mm.
So I was wondering if you could tell me a bit more about that and how you got onto it and, your experience.
Okay. So yes, last year I was in London from June, I think June 26th up until September. I don't remember the exact yeah, I don't remember the exact date, but it was a 3 month residency in Gasworks in London. In 2019 I got a prize. It's called the Artex Prize. It's in collaboration with a bank here in Nigeria called Access Bank. And part of the prize was a grant to support, it's funding to support my solo exhibition, which because of COVID couldn't happen in 2020, but happened last year. And then also residency, which was also partly supported by RX and the British Council, and I think mentorship. Yeah, I think, and yeah, that's it. And it was very interesting. It was supposed to happen in 2020, but because of the pandemic, it didn't happen up until last year. And I'm actually even happy that that didn't happen in 2020 because if I look at how 2020 was also a period, that was the first and only time we had like a major lockdown here in Nigeria. But it was a period of self reflection and really asking myself questions. So it was good it happened last year because if I look at in terms of what it is I wanted out of the residency experience, if I'd gone in 2020, I don't think I would have gotten as much as I did in 2021. It was a very interesting experience. That was my first time in any European country. And yeah, it was interesting. It made me think a lot and made me appreciate my own country more, actually. I remember the first of we did the isolation, and when I started to go out, one of the things I noticed is that the people there, a lot of people there, I'll go out and unlike in Nigeria where you go out and you see a lot of people looking very colorful and bright. The one thing I noticed is people don't wear colors there. And I was like, oh my God, this is so different from home. Everybody is looking gray and white and black and brown. I was like, what's going on? Where are the colors here? Except when you go to places like Oxford Circus and all, you see, at least a bit of color. So when you're passing through stores like Prada, and you're like, okay, that's some good color there. Everything looked flat. But it was an interesting experience. I was in a very supportive environment. I had plans of what I wanted to do. So the idea was, for me, I knew that going for the residency, I wanted to figure out what I wanted to present during my solo exhibition. And that was a very good space to really think through the things I was thinking about, try them out. If it didn't work out, and the Gaswork people were extremely supportive. They gave me other ideas, which eventually I tried out. I did like a demo, worked out well, came back to Nigeria. Also meeting other artists in person, going to see different types of art. And this was my first time. Every time that I travel out of Nigeria has always been like 2 weeks out, 2 weeks out. But here I'm there for 3 months. So one of the things I did every Friday, I would take time and go to different galleries and just go and look at art and take time to meet people and just take time to really inspire, just be inspired because when I stay in Abuja, Lagos is the heart of art in Nigeria. Abuja is sort of like in between. It's not bad, but it's not, compared to Lagos. So I felt a bit like I'm away. And it made me really, being there made me also appreciate my practice because the way that I work is also one of the things I struggled with at the start of my career where the project ideas I have, even if I had said, oh, I'm a documentary photographer, one thing I realized was the way that I approach personal projects were not the sort of like documentary style of projects where you follow people around, stay around. It's like I'm using this, either I'm doing like, for example, it's all in my head where I do layered images or the new project I'm working on with men where I'm doing like deep takes and playing around with video. So going there and seeing that there's space for all types of artists because I would say if you look at it commercially here in Nigeria, while there's focus on like photographer, but more focus is given to traditional artists, painters, sculptors, and all of that. But being in the UK, seeing that there's space for everybody, whether you're playing with sound or you're experimenting with video, experimenting, whatever art form you're doing, there's space for you. If you're doing textiles, it's sort of like a very inclusive space, and there's no hierarchy to. It's not like people come out and say we don't really pay attention to photographers, but you can tell that they pay more attention to this other artist than they do to this other artist. But going there and seeing how, everybody's respected and treated equally, it really made me know that, okay, keep doing what you're doing. There's space for you somewhere. And it was an overall beautiful experience. It was good to meet artists. Like I met Nina. I was able to speak in, programs there. Taught at the documentary workshop, panel events. It was also a good space to network. And that's the thing about this practice where you don't always have the social media has really helped us to be able to break that barrier of having to fly to be able to network. You can network with people, and I continue to network with people just through social media. But also, there's a different thing when you're doing the person to person networking where people can see you, people can hear you, people can really connect to, figure you out as a person, as an artist, as a creator. So it was really good to be able to meet with people. It was really a good experience. I think the only thing that I struggled with sometimes when we had less sun and more cold. And not even the cold, it was just the fact that I'm used to sun somehow and I like sun. And so when there's no sun, I just find myself being sad. But it was good and also being secure. And the time that I left Nigeria, I just come back from my research working with children and an elderly person who had been labeled a witch. And that really impacted my mental health. It sent me to an abyss. It was such a dark moment for me. So doing that research and going to London sort of gave me space to just stay away from project and just purge myself and focus on other things that sort of made me happy and light. And also I got to meet a lot of people that probably would never have met. Also an overall wonderful experience. And I think it's also good for artists to have that kind of opportunities where you just stay away from, creating and have time to think or try out new things. And I also like the fact that Gasworks doesn't say you have to create. You know how some residency opportunities you're expected to create by the end of the residency? Or with Gasworks, it wasn't that. It was create, don't create. They don't. That was not that's not the idea behind their residency. So that sort of gives you that, doesn't put you on that pressure. And it was also good to have the open studio and have people come into your studio and see what you've been doing. It was really good, really good.
So it sounded multifaceted. So you had that interaction with other artists, you could go to galleries, you had that space from your projects. So it sounds like it was a really good space for you.
Yeah.
And potentially, hopefully, if I'm hearing it right, also probably came at a good time as well, maybe.
Yeah, it did come at a good time. Like I said, it was a good mental break from Nigeria. Like the first thing I did was to disconnect from Nigeria for like a month. I didn't want to engage with my projects that I'd worked on. I didn't read news or anything about my country. I just stayed off. And, I had time to think through my project ideas. For example, I have another project which I've been working on, which is called Unbox, which looks at, masculinity as it relates to the outward appearance of men. And I had this project, it had the pictures, it's a multimedia project, so I have pictures and I have videos. Before I came for the residency, I'd already planned to pay somebody to work on the videos. But when I was doing the residency, the first 1 month, I realized, okay, what are you doing? You have all this time to yourself. Why don't you sit down and learn how to edit videos and put these videos together? After all, you're the one who shot these videos. And it was during the residency I was able to, try something out. And I said, oh, this doesn't work. Try another thing. I'm like, okay, I like the way my work is looking. I was able to put together the video and that saved me some money. And it's not just the money. I was happy that now I can say, okay, I can edit videos. And I already knew the type of, because even if I was going to outsource somebody to do it, I wanted someone who would connect to the vision, the artistic presentation of the project. And actually that just came naturally for me. It's just looking at YouTube again and saying, okay, this is how they do it. Okay, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do it like this. And because I had that space to think, so it's also really good sometimes when you just take a break and then, give yourself that space and being in that space where there's not much pressure. At the time, I had constant light, good internet. Well, that was really helpful for me.
I think what you're talking about leads quite nicely to my next question around influences. So it sounds like this particular period certainly sounds to me like it influenced you, but talk about your influences, whether this residency or other things on your artwork and your projects.
Okay, I would say that there are several things that influence me. And people play a major part in terms of influences. I like to have interactions with artists. I like to study the work of artists, especially my senior colleagues. I like to read about artists, not just visual artists, but also like people, entertainers, and all of that. I like to read like the backstory of who they are, where they are coming from, how they got to where they are presently. I don't know, it just has a way that it inspires me to keep working. But in terms of like people in my practice, there are quite a number of people who have been a source of inspiration to me, who have also pushed me to this point where the words that they spoke were the words that I held on to and have gotten me to this point. You know, we have like Andrea Siebo, who is the Nigerian photographer, documentary photographer, or shall I say storyteller. There's also George Oshodi, he's also a Nigerian photographer, documentary photographer. And just one of the things I normally would do is there are several of them, several artists. I normally would take my time, study their works, look through their sites, just try and understand how is it that they see, what informs the way that they see. And when I have opportunities to meet with them physically, these are the kind of questions I ask them, what is your process? What inspires you? I remember years ago, Andrew, I asked him that question and he said he likes to observe his environment. And it took me a while to understand that. I think he said that to me in 2016, 27, early 2017 or 20, I don't remember the year. And it took a while for me to understand that, but somehow that also now became a way or has become a way that I'm also getting stories just by observing, being inquisitive. Why is this like this? Why is this like this? Why is this like this? So there are several people. And I think social media has also helped me because when I started to use Instagram, like the way that I started to, when I started practicing as a photographer, the way that I would look at images on Instagram wasn't just because I want to look and like, but it also helped me to shape my, like, influence the way that I see. So there are some images that I will see, and I've been in that kind of situation before where I saw a potential image, but I just felt there's nothing special in this. And then I'll see somebody upload that same type of scenario and that type of setting. And I'll be like, I've been in this kind of situation. I never thought that this would make for a good image. This kind of thing would be a good image. And then seeing that someone else photographed that, it looked good to me. And then somehow just consuming images or looking at images or studying images online and offline has a way that it has also made me to see better because I say, oh, okay, so I could actually take this and this tells a story. Okay, I never thought that this angle or this way of looking, the ways of seeing, this way of seeing is a good way. And yeah, I mean, I also like, I don't, because I'm a photographer doesn't mean I'm only inspired by photographers. I really like other types of artists like painters. I do follow a lot of painters and people who work with like pottery. I actually have serious interest in pottery. I'm only trying to find time to take and go and learn about pottery actually. But I'll say, for example, Yayo Kusama, that's somebody that I have read in and out about. I bought one of her books when I was at Tate. And, I really like her. Like I said, I like to hear the backstory of artists because I know that nobody woke up and became a successful artist. There's a process. And so I like to take my time to read about them, to, hear everything. How did they get to where they went through? Did they go through challenges or I just really like to hear about other artists' process. I have a long list of names. I forget her name now, but on Instagram she's Brooke something. She's really this popular artist. There's this other female artist, and some of the videos I used to watch at the time on B&H on YouTube, B&H Photo, they have this thing where they organize like workshops or something, and those are the videos that I still watch them to this day that really helped me when I started. Like it was like a free photography course, but the only thing is not structured because today I'm learning about lights more, I'm learning about flash, but somehow those things had a ripple effect on me, hearing from different photographers, understanding their process. I have a long list of people who have been of great influence. There's Emeka Obo, the sound artist. And one of the things I do is because I don't limit myself in the way that I present the topics or my presentation of my project. So I'm also in touch with people that I find interesting. For example, Emeka Obo is a sound artist whom I greatly admire and respect. And, when I'll tell him, oh, I'm working on this project and it has sound, and, he's not somebody that would condemn me for trying that sound. It's this kind of person that will even push you to, try new ways, try new things. Yeah, so I have a long list of people actually, people and things that have influenced me. I would say movies play a great role in helping me, especially in terms of video. One thing I do is the way that I watch movies. I like to learn about. I find that I learn so much about composition from watching movies. Composition, understanding colors, understanding how light plays a role in mood. So the way that I watch movies, and I don't just look at it for the sake of looking, but I'm looking at how, what I'm trying to think of how, maybe because I'm also a theater artist, why did the director make this decision to, or why did the lighting person make this decision to put the light at a certain location, which now helps give shadows, which sort of, so there's a way that movies have also really helped me, especially for the, I mean, I don't do like extensive video work, but, and also in my photography, I've seen that just by looking at certain scenes in a movie, that's also helped, shape the way that I think and I compose images too.
My last question is what's next? So it sounds like you do have some current projects, but what's next in the maybe short to medium future?
Okay, well, I'm still working on two of my projects. In fact, by March, I should be traveling to resume work on my project on Box. I try to make sure that every year I take out time for my personal projects. I mean, I make sure it's one of the things I learned from my senior colleagues where they encourage you to continue to work on investing in your personal research. And I don't take it for granted. Every year, I dedicate at least 2, 3, 4 months to work on my personal project. So I don't take any commissions when it's time to work on my personal project because personal projects are personal for me and it's a way of not just showing the things I'm interested in, but also contributing my quota to society. So yeah, I mean, I'm currently working on personal projects. I'm involved in some exhibitions and which we're planning, working on, and also really strategizing on how to be better in terms of my photography. Like this year, I sort of got that. I said, an epiphany now. I felt this thing of, really questioning myself as to what is it I'm doing as a photographer? Why am I doing, like redefining my purpose as a photographer? And that sort of is pushing the limits of what I do. And, every time I'm constantly talking to myself and saying, anytime you're out in the field, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to be better. And, I mean, I do it every year where I try to think of how can I be better than the last year? And so it's the same path that I'm on where I'm taking some decisions and saying we need to do this or it's time to read. I remember some days ago I logged out of social media because I'm like, okay, you're in that space where you need to read. So you take out all the apps and focus on reading. Even as you prepare to travel and research for your project. So yeah, I'm working on personal projects and I have things planned out, but not everything is planned out too. I'm also a freelancer. So sometimes you plan and, sometimes, of course, I have to make money. So I'm also quite flexible sometimes where I'm open for assignments, commissions and opportunities that come my way.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful speaking with you today.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And all the best and good luck with all your projects.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode with Etinosa. I really hope you enjoyed it. More information about Etinosa and the podcast can be found in the podcast notes. If you're able to, please rate and review the podcast in the podcast apps. In the next episode, I speak with Sabrina Spencer, who's an actor, voiceover artist, and writer based in New York City. Here's a short clip of her conversation.
Well, why do actors get paid so much money? Like, what are they really doing? How hard can their job be? And they really do work. Especially, if you're a principal, they work really, really hard. They work very long days. And that's another thing. Being on set and being in the industry really opened my eyes to the fact that the finished product, it's just a product of a lot of work from a lot of people. And it's just incredible when you see how many crew members are necessary, all kinds of crew members and, staff behind the scenes people are necessary for a show, a film, even a small commercial. I've worked on commercials of different sizes, and it always amazes me. You might have 2 or 3, 4 actors and a whole lot of crew. And when you see how hard they work, I really developed a greater appreciation for their jobs than I had before.
I look forward to you joining me in the next episode with Sabrina.